Welcome back to another episode of Acceptable Chess. As always, I'm your host, John Harden, here with National Master Andrew Hoy. And Andrew, we are doing some live commentaries of two contests today in the AC Autumn Classic.
Yes, we are. So we have two games tonight, and the first one is between Robert and Lydia, and the second game should be starting in about 15 minutes. So do you want to take a look at the opening of the first game?
Yeah, I very much do. So it looks like Rob has opened with his favorite, his heart's joy, no matter my feelings about it, the English opening. And it looks like things have already gotten a little bit unusual. So Lydia's played a reverse Sicilian. Mm-hmm. So by playing this move e5, we end up in a structure that's very similar to that which occurs when white plays e4 and black plays c5. And so this, while very reasonable and gives black some decent plans and ideas of what to do, I think it's an open question whether this is just better for white because white gets all the same ideas as black does in the Sicilian with a move in hand.
I think it's very different. I think that white is doing okay in the opening, but I think that black also has plenty of counterplay and is doing just fine. It's not a typical open Sicilian. There are some differences. The extra move doesn't always... it's not always as beneficial as you'd think it would be. Sometimes black can kind of wait and see what happens. But usually in the English, black doesn't always go for this e5 pawn break because we want to take advantage of the fact that we don't have to commit to d4, the analog of d4 for black is d5.
Right, the analogous move,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the idea is to do something slower, like play a closed Sicilian instead, and we can play some sort of King's Indian setup instead. So that would be an alternative.
Yes, I have had some success with playing that exact setup, actually, that reverse Sicilian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Felix, I don't care for the English. I think it's a sort of indirect and strange way for white to play. I much prefer, as you have seen many times over the years, I like the systems and the openings in which white says, I'm going to come get you. And the English does not really do this. So it's just not my fave. So yeah, after some early skirmishes, Lydia decided to take on c3, which gives Robert an extra center pawn, and that, I think, has to be to his benefit somewhat, and probably will help him in an endgame. But then we're having just a little bit of some strange play, I think, from both players. I think I like this move e4 that comes in, although I'm missing some
we
things.
Have a few
more
things.
developing
Bishop e6
moves.
happens,
Sorry.
Now bishop e2. So I think in this position, white has to solve the problem of the dark square bishop. If he can do that, he'll have the bishop pair, and I think he'll have a very nice position, but there's still some work to be done. So bishop b2 is certainly an attempt to do that. We'll see what happens. I think he's gearing up for d4. I think d4 maybe was good back here after knight c6 as well, just quickly playing it. Black has a hard time getting on any of these dark squares. These pawns do a good job of covering them. And then white can figure out how he wants to finish his development.
That's true, actually. Just to look at a sideline there in your idea that if Lydia were to take the bait and exchange with ED, I think we could even consider... I mean, yes, this is certainly the more natural capture. Oh, excuse me. No, CD is forced because the knight would be able to take on c3. So, my mistake. I was thinking that there might be some idea here of E takes D and freeing the dark squared bishop to move onto the G5 square. For example.
Unless you're going to go really nuts and play Queen G4 someday. It's
right.
I don't see how that works. So I think the way Robert played is fine. It's easy to say that we have a normal looking game. E4, I like that. I think you have to fight against this bishop pair and keep the position closed. After knight d4, let's see what we had. So we had queen d7 with the idea of defending everything and kind of keeping the tension. And now bishop b5. All right, so I do think that black has to decide how she's going to deal with this pin. It's a little bit annoying, especially if white takes on e6 first. She castled. I think that's a very reasonable move. And now we've caught up with the live game.
Okay, so it seems like there are rather a few easy moves for both sides to continue making before things start to get complicated. Robert can finish his development. put his queen maybe on a4 to increase the pressure on the knight on c6. It's probably not terrible to also think about something simple like queen e2 or queen h5. And Lydia can probably do something to relieve the pressure on her c6 knight and then bring her rooks to the middle. And it does look a little closed up.
Yeah, it does. So here I think I would probably take on c6, just go for this structure. Black's isolated c-pawns are going to be a weakness forever. So even if we have to do some work to finish developing this bishop, the fact that these doubled c-pawns are always going to be doubled c-pawns means that white has achieved something tangible out of the opening. And I don't see how we're going to win those pawns now, but I just kind of have faith that sooner or later we'll be able to do something good. So to give a concrete line, I think a4 now makes the most sense so that this bishop doesn't languish on b2 forever. And then we would probably play bishop a3 later.
Right. Yeah, and in the event of something like c5 there, I guess the knight would probably drop back to e2, and maybe the f4 square is nice.
I don't mind b3 immediately hitting c5, something like this, and I think we're very close to winning that.
Oh yeah, yeah. If we can get c4 to happen too, that knight is going to come back to d4 with I think even more pop.
Yeah.
So
yep.
That makes sense to me.
All right. So after a6, Robert brought the bishop back to a4, and now b5, and I think he went to c2. Yeah. So this is where we are in the game. We are hitting this e4 pawn, and it is a little bit difficult to defend. Probably f5 makes the most sense. The idea being that if white is going to take this bishop, we're going to want to have something to fight against the bishop pair. The knights are a little bit tough to play with against the bishop pair, so I think the only thing that makes sense is to play for a quick knight e5 and knight d3 and try and restrict these bishops forever.
So it seems like our vocal audience member, Felix Hatton, spotted. Felix is concerned about the king after f5. What do you say to him?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit scary, but I think at the same time it's hard to attack the king. We only have one bishop that can get onto these light squares, so just again to give it a somewhat concrete line, f5, take, bishop e3. We're not actually threatening anything right now. Maybe even we can play knight a5, and if this knight drops back, a quick c5 with the idea c4.
Ooh, entombing. I like it.
Yeah, and I think this would be a large advantage for black already.
That's very good. Well, Lydia seems to be picking up the brainwaves that you're sending out here, because we do see on the board this move f5, and yeah, I think it's hard for me to resist. Even seeing that very compelling line that you just gave, I have to say it would feel hard for me to resist grabbing that bishop on e6 here. So we'll see if Rob goes for that or likes something else. And it does look like
I like what he played. I think a4 is a really good waiting move. He doesn't have to take this bishop right away. And now he's going to avoid all of those lines that we just looked at because he's threatening to take on b5.
Yeah, that's good stuff, right? Provoking some kind of weakness. And I think if the knight on c6 swaps our nice knight on d4, we do get a very strange-looking structure, but I think probably our extra oomph in the center and control of some key dark squares probably still leaves us reasonably happy there.
I agree. I think that there's no rush to play d3. We'll be able to play it later. Yeah. Simply castle and maybe moves like queen e2, and then only when we're ready would we play d3.
You know, I have to say, though, if we castle right now, is f4 just a... Oh, well, it does hang the e-pawn, doesn't it? So I guess we're not quite ready. I'm concerned about
black's
f4.
move, so I don't know what he'd play.
Right. F4, f3 looks really quick.
Yeah, I guess you can always take. And with the bishop pair, I'm happy to open lines, even at the little bit of mess that we get after this. Something like this to start hitting this e4 pawn. And I think this is absolutely fine for white. We went through that very quickly, so there are probably some good alternatives in there. But it's just an example line that shows why I'm not really concerned about f4 yet. Maybe later we will be, but it's we're a ways away from that.
Right.
All right, so it looks like Robert did not take on d4. Instead, he played knight e5. This makes a lot more sense. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Lydia's black. I keep on getting the colors backwards.
Not at all.
So knight e5 makes a lot more sense. There's no good reason to let this c pawn come to d4, and furthermore, I think that the knight has some really good squares that it's eyeing, and it can't be chased away from e5. This bishop is very far back, and even if the bishop comes to a3 and hits the rook, I think rook f6 makes the most sense, and then we'll figure out what to do later, whether we want to play rook e8 or play for rook f8 after a move like c5.
Right, and yeah, there are options to exchange that bishop in various ways, I would think. There's probably still, maybe we have to play rook c8 first, but even your plan again of something like c5 and trying to close that diagonal off. So yeah, I think that that assessment makes sense. It's proving to be an interesting game.
Yeah, we got out of the opening pretty well, and I think it's looking like a normal chess position, which is always nice.
Yes, something that'll be good for us to look at again in the roundup. Shall we take a moment to meet our players?
Sure.
All right, tell you what, why don't you introduce our white pieces, Pilot, and I will take care of the black.
Now that's just a quiz to see if I remember who's playing which colors. All right, so playing white in this game is Robert Larimer. He's originally from Sioux City, but he went to college and medical school at McGill in Montreal, so spent some time up in Canada.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then he spent time in New Orleans where he did 20 years until Katrina pushed him to move to Alexandria. Now, Robert started playing chess because of Bobby Fischer, much as so many people. Robert followed the match with Spassky in 72, and then because he's from Louisiana, he obviously knows a little bit about Paul Morphy, and he'll be checking out the Paul Morphy Chess Club once COVID slows down.
I've been told he's already been in touch with them.
Oh, excellent. Didn't waste any time.
Yes. It's exciting stuff. Looks like we had a question. We'll sort of deal with that later. Looks like Lydia did not actually get back to us in time for the game to start, but that's all right. I did get a chance to talk with her a little bit before the game. So Lydia Host is playing with our black pieces, and what I can tell you is that she joined our tournament because her entire family is playing, and so she felt some relation pressure there, but also that she has not been playing chess actually all that long. So I think that she's picked up a lot in her year or so playing, from what I've gathered. She really first got addicted to it once Chess.com's app made its way onto her phone. We saw some really good play from her last week against Chip Rutan. I think were it not for the unfortunate blunder of bishop takes a6, that she probably had a really nice game, and it would have been really interesting to see the winning chances develop. So I am intrigued to see what'll happen today. I can't help but feel, given what I've seen from her play and her concentration, that she won't be blundering today unless she gets into serious time pressure. I have a feeling that's a personal goal of hers, and so I think this should be an interesting game all the way down to the finish.
Yeah, I agree. We actually have a few more moves in the game, so let's take a look at them. After knight e5, Robert did exchange on b5, which again makes a lot of sense, and now he took on a8. This is a double-edged move. It gives black the file, but it certainly reduces the punch of a move like f4 in the future. So again, nothing without trade-offs in chess.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the rook's ability to invade on a2, and maybe being a little annoying there. But I guess maybe
Me too. We'll have to see what happens.
Right, queen b1 could try to chase it away, but there are some natural defenders, right? The knight on d5 moves, and the bishop on e6 defends the rook. Yeah, rook on the 7th. Exactly, Felix. Exactly.
Yeah, so it looks like Robert did castle, and now Lydia's probably considering rook a2. So if rook a2 is played, I think you're right. Queen b1 looks like the only move that makes much sense. We are able to attack b5 now, so there are some discovered attacks here, and we're picking up an immediate tempo on the rook. So Lydia would have to do something. Let's say, for example, knight f6. I think bishop a1 might be strong here. And now, after hitting b5, that kind of compels a move like c6.
Am I wrong? I think there might actually be a very exciting tactic here.
There is.
Yeah, so
You're
after...
jumping ahead.
Well, okay. So if knight f6, does white not have knight takes e6 followed by bishop b3 with a...
Not until after we play bishop a1.
I
So
see.
bishop a1 now threatens some stuff. So, for example, c6 defending the pawn actually loses right away to taking on e6, because now we get this pin on b3.
I think this would help to answer your question, Felix. I think the reason the queen cannot immediately go to a7 is because ever since f5 was played earlier, this bishop has been hanging on e6. So if the queen is to go away too quickly, we're going to drop some material.
Yeah, so it looks like Lydia is dealing with those threats correctly. She brought the bishop back to f7 where it's out of range of the knight, and now all of those tricks that we just talked about really come to nothing. So by waiting a move before playing rook a2, it's a nice prophylactic move and it avoids all of those tricks.
I gotta say, that is a level of foresight that I am not used to seeing in the acceptable chess tournament. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think bishop f7 makes sense almost all of the time. It's better to keep the bishop when your opponent already has the bishop pair so that you can eventually fight against it. Another rule of thumb, when you have the bishop pair and you're fighting against one bishop, you really want your pawns to be on the color of your opponent's bishop. That's for two reasons. Your pawns, so for example, in this case, white's pawns are all on dark squares, so we have it wrong, but this is why chess is so concrete. But if we had the pawns on light squares, they would restrict this bishop. And then the second consideration, if this dark square bishop ever trades itself for a knight, we would be left with a bishop that is possibly able to restrict its opponent better. Alternatively, if we exchange the bishops one for one, so if both light square bishops get exchanged, then we would be left with a good bishop against a knight.
Right. That all makes sense. Right. All examples of the kind of chaotic, the planning within chaos that chess so often is, that we are attempting to leave ourselves without, no matter what happens, not having the ability to simply predict every possible outcome that could result.
Yeah, exactly. And just making moves that are based in sound principles will generally lead to a good position. In this case, I think that white is at risk of slipping into a worse position. So I think he needs to do something right away. I like the move d3 now. It looks a little bit crazy, but the idea is we're going to start to break up the black queenside with a minority attack. And d3 is not a move you would play if you didn't think you were worse. But I do think that white is going to be worse if he doesn't do this. And that's because the moves like knight c4 are coming. And after knight c4, I just don't see how we can untangle successfully.
Looks like, let's check in to make sure that our second game is able to begin here. Let's see how they're doing.
Looks like they just started.
Very good.
Let's pull that up on our other little board.
Yeah. Well timed.
Yeah.
Well timed.
All right, and let's take a look at this opening. So it looks like we actually had b4.
Wow.
So Frank is showing some stuff. So there are a couple of ways to meet this. E5 makes some optical sense because it takes over the center. If your opponent's not stopping you from playing a move like E5, you should probably play the move E5. However, I think that there's also an argument to be made for knight f6 on move 1. This bishop is coming to b2 no matter what, and now after bishop b2, at least the bishop is blunted. We might see some tricks after e5, so let's see what actually happens. So
is this called the Polish? I can't...
It is called the Polish.
Hey!
Showing off. So this is kind of the main line of the Polish, so far as Polish players are concerned, because white is stealing this e5 center pawn in exchange for this b4 pawn. And now we see some really crazy stuff. So we didn't take, taking on g7 is supposed to be the most testing line, and this can get a little bit crazy. Black gives away this exchange, however he gets some good dark square control on both diagonals. Instead he went back to b2, so I have to say this really doesn't promise anything for black. Now knight f6. It looks like a3 was played, and this bishop dropped back to a5. So he wants to slow down the d4 break as much as possible. e3 was played. We still can't play d4 because of this pin. And now we had castles. Looks like knight f3 was
very
played.
quickly.
Yeah. Bishop g4. Maybe a little bit too quickly, but
I would agree.
We'll come back to that.
Right.
And now h3. Yeah, so I think we've kind of reached an interesting moment. I think black should probably take on f3 because otherwise he's going to have a hard time fighting back in the center once d4 finally comes in.
Right.
Yeah, so let's see what happens. He played bishop h5. Bishop e2 makes a lot of sense, threatening to take back with the bishop. Knight c6, castle, okay. And now h6, which I don't love the move h6. I think that's a little bit slow, and it doesn't make so much sense when this bishop's already here taking a look at this f6 knight.
Just have to take a moment to say that Rufus Bear spotted in the chat, dropping some opening knowledge. Yes, Rufus is correct. The bird, Felix, would be f4. Oh, I see. Yes, Rufus actually threw that in there as well. So thank you, Rufus. Always nice to see you.
Yeah, so d4, d5 was played, and now I think it's safe to say that white has a nice advantage. The white bishops are better placed. White is ready to play c4 whenever he would like, and black's knight on c6 is awkwardly placed. It really doesn't have a future from the c6 square, so it's going to have to reroute itself over to the king side at some point.
And I have to note this because it is so useful that this is very typical of these d4, d5 structures. So even though we didn't start in a queen's pawn opening at all, the fact that we are in this d4, d5 structure should say that the knight probably doesn't belong on c6.
Yeah, yep. All right, so for you guys who have joined us in the chat, I'll show you a quick line against the Polish so you never have to worry about it. The best move is c6, and this more or less refutes the Polish. The idea is after bishop e2, we play a5, and the queen is defending this. We have the rook here, and this is kind of a position that you get all the time. And black is better. Almost winning. We're ready to play d5. This bishop is not going to do much, and black is going to be able to make use of the a file. Although we have to move a full 6 pieces before we can do that.
Yeah, the entire squad has got to get up and wake up.
And now we'll never give opening lines again. All right, so what is happening? Do you want to jump back to the other game and see what's happening?
Oh, yes, I'm sure there's been some action. So it looked like Robert did not pick up what you were putting down. He, instead of going for the structure-changing d3 that you had suggested, went with a more maneuvering, knight to b3, perhaps trying to plop this knight into c5. It does look like a somewhat attractive square. A little bit tactically loose, maybe, would be my concern. And then they're followed from Lydia, knight to c4. So this looks pretty good. I think even if...
You can take a look at something like this. You always have to look at these attacking moves. But we have 2 good options for black. We can either take on b2, but I'm really reticent to take that bishop. It's just so bad. I think a move like queen c6 makes a lot more sense. Attacking this knight, the bishop is still attacked, and we would be winning a piece now.
Yeah, it does not look favorable.
No,
there.
It really doesn't. So that forces bishop c1. Bishop a1, this pawn is not going anywhere anytime soon, so bishop a1 doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and queen c1 I think maybe runs into rook a2. So that would also, I think, lose a piece. Or at least demand now bishop a1, and I think that...
Yeah, we would have to play something like this.
Yeah, black is firmly in the driver's seat, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we already have ideas of taking on d2 if we can move this knight, so f4 already suggests itself.
Very nice. Very nice. Yes, that's I was looking for a way to execute that idea, and you cracked it.
Yeah, so Lydia very calmly plays c6, and when your opponent's playing a move like c6, you know you're in big trouble. It doesn't do anything active, even though black is ready to go. She's just slowly sitting on the position, slowly making sure that nothing will hang, and saying that she has no fear of this knight c5 move. And the queen on e7 picks up a tempo, and I think that the knight has to go back. I don't see what else it can do. Okay, so after d4, this is a little bit interesting. We're defending the knight, and we have this tactical justification because the knight can drop back. But we are giving up a pawn in this line. So here we can steal the c3 pawn, and I'm having a hard time seeing how white should continue. I guess we must play queen e1 because every other square is hanging a whole queen. And now I was thinking that knight e4 looks good, and we just have these really nice knights, and this b pawn is ready to go.
Yeah, that's looking really tough. That's getting to the place where Robert's going to really need to play something dramatic and start to inflict some chaos if he wants to keep playing.
Yeah. Instead of taking on Passanta, it looks like we had Queen G5. So Queen G5 is a very direct idea. We're just playing for mate. And I don't know. I think I would probably cash out and take the pawn. I don't see a reason not to take that pawn right here. All right, so Robert played Queen E1, and I think this is the live position. So we can take a look at that and see what we think.
Yeah, let's jump back to Frank and Ted as well while we have a moment.
Yeah, let's wait on.
Right.
Do you think F4 is good here? Before we move away from this, we're already starting to get to some nice tactics, so I don't want to spoil the moment and rush away from it.
Oh, fair enough.
I think F4 is good. It, again, looks a little bit scary to start giving away all these pawns, but I don't know. This attack is pretty serious. We're already threatening moves like F3, maybe taking on E3, and this seems like a pawn sacrifice that's justified. We have an open file for the rook. We have nice squares for all of our knights, and we can't play G3 as white without dropping H3.
Right. You know, I even more than Rook A2, I'm also actually very interested in Rook A1, just trying to tie up that C1 bishop, and then when I take on E3, you have much more limited options in terms of how to take back.
Yeah, for sure. The bishop is a key defender of the E3 square, otherwise a knight's just going to hop into E3, and that would be a nice fork on these pieces.
Yeah, so I like that plan as well. Yeah, it seems like, as you said, another bad sign for White's position is Black seems a little spoiled for choice.
Yeah, I think probably we would have to take with the bishop, but if you have to take with this bishop, you're not even winning a pawn anymore, and this looks a little bit scary. And the tactical point that I didn't mention explicitly is that this is just overwhelming, and there's no good way to stop mates on G2.
Yeah, having to play F3 is not...
Definitely not what you're hoping for.
No, not impressive.
It just entombs this bishop forever. This knight can never be chased away, and this E3 pawn is fantastic.
Strong stuff. Makes me excited to see Lydia continue to play this tournament. I like what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and it looks like she played bishop to H5, which again makes a lot of sense. I think it's a nice slow move, and now we have the very nice threat of bishop F3, and I don't think there's a good way to deal with that one either. It does allow G3, so maybe you can hold on with G3, King H2, and pray a little bit, but I don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, maybe we'll see how quickly she can reroute one of her knights to get over, and maybe there's a sacrifice.
Or there might be a rook A2 and rook takes C2 stuff at the right moment. All right, so if we start to look at the other game now, it looks like after C4 we had knight E7 was played, and then after knight E7, white developed the other knight, so it defends the C4 square. And I think most of these positions, especially after knight E7, we have to consider if we want to take on D5. So, for example, if we do want to take on D5, we could maybe play knight C3 and then take on D5 next move. I don't hate that idea. I think that might be a reasonable approach as well. Now after C6, I think it's definitely still better for white, but black has done all that he can to kind of hold on to the position. And it's not often that I'll suggest the move, but C5 actually is at least a consideration. It's a twofold move. It stops black from creating any sort of battery on the dark squares, and this B7 pawn is very weak, so I think we can already start going after that right away.
Yeah, that's very nice. Certainly, to take on D5 would be much less attractive now that black has played C6, and you are not able to eliminate a center pawn by taking.
Yeah, so it looks like we are going to see this battery if queen D6 is played. And it looks like black did play for queen D6. So one thing that he was avoiding, if he plays queen D6 right away, C5 is a nice in-between move, and we kind of transpose back to those lines we were just talking about. I'm okay with this, though, because I think the queen is also well placed on E6. And now these pieces are all cut off on the queen side. I think that C5 would be a bad move in this particular position. Instead, what Ted did is he took on F3, and after taking on F3, now he played queen D6, so he's threatening mate in 1. and white defended that with g3, and now we've caught up to the main game.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I was a fan of waiting as well, just in the aspect of your opponent may not immediately recognize what you're up to, and the threat of simply taking bishop takes f3 and then checkmate is a little bit more hidden. I think on a practical level, trying to sort of veil your intentions as much as possible is usually a good idea.
Yeah, although here I think that it's possible to play ideas like knight g6 and knight h4. So I think that there's still plenty of play left for black in this position.
Yeah, and after knight h4 and the bishop dropping back, let's say, to h1, I would say maybe even going for glory and playing knight h5.
Yes, definitely, and that makes a ton of sense in this position. However, first and foremost, I really want to consider taking on c4. Now that we've spent the time to set up this battery, it's a really nice setup, and I don't want it to be disturbed by the move c5 at an inopportune moment. So this would stop c5. There's no c-pawn. We can't play c5. And now black can continue the attack basically for free. This d5 push is never anything to be concerned about, and the only thing that I see for white is to play e4 and e5, which I guess is reasonable. So maybe keep the d-pawn on and deal with d6. I don't know. It's I go back and forth on this one. I'd spend a lot of time considering this one.
Yeah, I'm interested in maybe actually putting a rook on the e file and trying to sink my knight into e4. I also think that that's a way to secure this battery that you're talking about and try and keep the center closed. As you noted, as long as the center stays locked, the b3 knight, the b2 bishop, and arguably the c2 queen stay locked out of the game.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern that I have as black is that white is going to play rook c1, line up on the c file, and get a chance to take on d5. That would really reduce all the pressure. The other motif that you have to worry about, and we might actually see this, black played knight h7 in the game, and after knight h7, it looks like we had e4 played. So e4 is okay. I think maybe more to the point would be taking on d5 and then playing queen c5. If the queens do get swapped off, well, white does have the bishop pair, and this light square bishop controls an awful lot of squares that black can never deal with. We don't have to worry about knight g5. The bishop drops back and defends everything, and it's very, very hard to come up with any sort of productive mate with this bishop on g2. So I think this would probably be a good way for white to play now, and instead he played e4. Again, this makes sense. Meet a counterattack on the flanks with a break in the center, and with the bishop pair, we want to open up lines for the bishops as soon as possible.
I think you got to take on e4 right now.
Yeah, you can't allow e5. That would be way too much. We would play e5, probably take on d5, and then play knight c5. We don't even have to take on d5 right away.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to understand that sort of thing, and probably most players would take there. We'll see what Ted decides to do, but I think it's easy to see why he might pick up on this, simply because it spoils his battery to allow that pawn to come to e5.
Yeah, of course, the downside of this is that white does have an extra center pawn and more space. So I think that allowing that is a serious decision, and after e4, you want to carefully think about everything. So I would expect that Ted will take some time here.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Briefly looking back at the other game, we had knight e6 hitting the queen, so that stops this bishop f3 idea, at least for the moment. Lydia played queen g6, renewing the threat. And now white decided to bail out with knight f4. So this is going to force the exchange of at least one attacking piece, but it does give black this really nice structure, and the white bishops are forever bad. Now that f4 has been played, unless we can make the move g4 work, and it doesn't have to work right now, it can wait until the end game, the bishops are both going to be trapped forever by the f4 pawn and the e4 pawn.
It does seem, though, like there is some need for Lydia to tread carefully, though, because can Robert not go for maybe something like bishop d1 and try and get that light squared bishop off right now and maybe make some gains thereby?
We maybe can, but we still have to move bishop f3. So, for example, I was looking at rook a2, or maybe rook a1. I haven't decided which one makes more sense. And then if bishop d1 is played, let's say rook a2, because rook a1 would stop this idea, of course. We are pinning the bishop to the queen, and even if we start trading off all of the pieces, well, we just end up a piece up because we have this rook takes f1 check at the end of everything.
Yeah.
It's a very forcing line. It's a little bit long, so it's not super simple to calculate. But again, all these forcing moves, you just have to practice visualizing until you can see through them. So rook a2, because we want to be compliant and allow this. And now bishop f3 anyways. And I don't think that we can get away with taking. I think that this structure is just too bad for black to deal with. The only thing that we have to watch out for is playing a move like queen h6 looks really nice, attacking this h3 pawn, threatening to win, but it ends the game immediately. Queen e8 is mate.
Ouch. That's a nice line. That's a nice line. It looks like we are not going to get it because Lydia just shuts the whole thing down, playing rook to a1 instead.
Yeah, this is a much cleaner move. It's nice to not have to worry about any of those tricks. And we already see just how much of a conundrum white has now. The queen literally has no squares to move to. And the black rook is very strong on this 8th rank. A rook on the 7th is strong. A rook on the 8th is even better.
Very, very good. While we're...
I frankly don't see a good defense to bishop h3 already.
Yeah, bishop f3 is still a move. But, kind of tactically suspect maybe for newer players. So we'll see if this is something that Lydia is willing to venture.
Yeah, and it does look, before we leave this game, it looks like Robert played g3, and now Lydia will have to think about how to finish off white. We have ideas of bringing the knight in. We have ideas of planting the bishop on h3. Maybe the queen should come to the h-file and start attacking this way. Maybe we want to run the h-pawn up the board. So there are a lot of things to consider, and this is a perfect opportunity to spend a bunch of time and consider how to win.
Yeah, this is one of the lovely things about having a game 45 is when you've banked some time, as it looks like she has, she's still holding steady with 23 minutes on her clock, so more than enough time to polish this game off in good fashion. And of course, the kind of position that you never stop thinking about that week if you let it slip away.
Absolutely. So after e4 was played in the game between Frank and Ted, we had Ted playing knight g5 immediately. I think I like this a little bit more than taking on e4 first. Now if we take on e4, the bishop cannot recapture without giving itself up for the knight. The bishop dropped back to g2. We really can't allow this knight h2 check. There are just too many mates all of a sudden. And now after bishop g2, well, now we can probably take on e4. And by removing this very strong light square bishop for white, I think that black can then conduct the attack for free, basically. We're not making any huge positional concessions, and we can consider how we want to finish the game. Again, it looks like black has a very nice attacking position that's common in both of our games.
Right. While we have a moment here, it looks like we are at least reasonably caught up in both games. Why don't we meet the players in our second matchup today?
Sure. So it looks like Frank has the white pieces, and Frank is an army brat who ended up in Florida just after the Cuban Missile Crisis. He also started chess after the Bobby Fischer World Championship match in the 72 era, and then he left competitive chess shortly after that. So Frank went to school at the University of Denver, and he had to decide between becoming a lawyer or pursuing acting. In the end, unfortunately, he went to NYU, but he went for law school, not acting. Sorry, John.
No, it's okay. It was probably more sensible of him.
And like so many good chess players, Frank is also an IP lawyer. So we have a ton of intellectual property lawyers. At that point, can you really consider yourself a lawyer anymore? You're more like an engineer, just doing the legal work.
Yeah, it is true. Yeah, shout out to Charles Slade and Natasha Christensen, who probably won't tune into our stream, but are two other IP lawyers that we know who are both pretty strong chess players as well. Rediscovered acting a few years back. Fabulous. That's very good. And we all, I think, are aware that Frank's son Tyler is a two-time player in acceptable chess tournaments now, and is himself a professional actor who, like me, does some other work on the side. So best of luck to you, Frank. With the black pieces, we have Mr. Ted Vogt, also a two-time player. Ted lives in a central Vermont village where he sometimes practices law. A lot of lawyers in the crew. And more frequently does volunteer work for various nonprofit organizations, including the Green Mountain Club and the Garden Path Elder Living Organization, which is a parent organization for 2 elder care homes. He enjoys bicycling, hiking, cross-country skiing, playing guitar, painting, and reading. A Renaissance man is Mr. Ted Vogt. He learned chess from his father around the age of 6 and played a fair amount during his teens and early 20s, and not so much in the 40 years or so since, until he was introduced to acceptable chess. Well, doesn't that bring a tear to my eye? Yeah, I have to say we've got a lot of lawyers and a lot of people who are rediscovering chess through our organization. So I'm really happy to have created a welcome breeding ground. Breeding ground. What?
How are you doing with words there, John?
Not so well.
Okay.
Man, we're recording this, right? Ooh, breeding ground. That's pretty good. Yeah, not so much for that. Well, breeding of great chess games. That's how I'll save it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the stuff. Ooh.
All right, so it looks like we have black playing strongly in both of our games. So we'll quickly show knight takes e4. And again, this is as we discussed. Now, without the light square bishop, black has very little to worry about, and black can kind of go about corralling this d4 pawn with impunity. I think moves like rook d8 and rook e8 make a lot of sense, and probably black is just a clearly better position already. But this is not the more interesting of the two games. Let's take a look at the game between Robert and Lydia. Yeah, well, I think a lot has happened in the last couple of moves.
Right.
So after g3 was played, Lydia played queen e6. Again, makes a lot of sense, and we're threatening to play this e3 pawn break and really blow open the white position by taking on f2. And now, after bishop b3, I think it is a serious consideration to swap off this bishop and just try and hold on for dear life. Although, again, this is a very unfortunate position for white already. Now we had the very tricky move played rook b2, hitting the bishop. And I think the best for white is to repeat. You always want to repeat once, you gain a little bit more time with the increment, and you see what your opponent's intentions are. You get to see whether Robert is playing for a win or a draw. Of course, taking on c4 allows queen takes c4, and already I think we have big problems. The queen is coming into d3 right away. We also have the idea of bishop e2 winning an exchange. And in fact, this would actually win a whole rook because we would be able to take on c1 at the end of all these trades.
Yeah, just a really tough position for Rob there.
Yeah, so instead bishop d1 was played, but this ends the game immediately because c1 can be captured. After rook takes c1, I think there's really very little left in the game. The d1 bishop is also about to be lost. The queen still has no squares. This knight is a fantastic knight. And now Robert just prays for a miracle with king h2. e3 is a very clean move, although we can also take on d1 and be up 2 pieces. So I think both of those are good. And Lydia finished the game off after rook g1. She took on d1. The queen captured on e3. And now instead of taking back with the queen, we take back with the knight, which defends the rook yet another time. And this way, g4 doesn't actually threaten anything because the knight's still defending the rook.
I think it's important to note in that game, although Robert's position collapsed there at the end, that the moral of that game, if Rob is looking back at it later, is not that he blundered, right? That blunders happen sometimes because of inattention. And, you know, if you're looking at something like the Petrosian game we looked at on Tuesday night, where you are in a winning position and hang a whole queen, certainly. Blunders, that's the story. But here, I think it's much more about a perfectly reasonable mistake that happens in a very stressful position. And I don't think the moral of that is to feel like your inattention cost you the game. I think it's much more just a case of being outplayed.
Yeah, Lydia played a very clean game, put a lot of pressure on white, and it really all goes back to some of the early decisions that were made. The fact that the bishops got trapped and d4 was not played sooner. I think d4 really had to be played at some moment early on in the game in order to give white some breathing room. So again, I think it was a very good game, very interesting, and I'm pretty happy with the way that Lydia played. I think it was a very good game, and hopefully a few instructable moments for both colors in there.
Yeah, we'll see what we can highlight tonight. Obviously, we won't give it anywhere near the same amount of time in tonight's roundup, but we'll see what we can do to highlight maybe one or two key moments.
Yeah. And the game between Frank and Ted, we actually had this line that we talked about before. After knight g5 and bishop g2, black did exchange all the pieces on e4, and this is actually the live position that we alluded to before. And this is where we said we think that we like black, bring the rooks to the center, and probably black is doing better with the better pawn structure, and the dark square bishop is probably better for black than it is for white.
I can't say I count white out entirely if he's able to get that b2 bishop live, because the mate threats over on the king side are just as potent as black's are. But yes, I do see how black has a choice of targets here between piling up on the potentially weak d4 pawn and the attacks on the king side. Something like f5 seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I think the only thing that makes sense in this position is playing rook d1 and d5 next. And maybe for white we can play d5 right away if we're given the opportunity. For that reason, I think that black should play rook d8 to slow this down and then figure out how to meet this d5 pawn break. So after a move that was played in the game, knight g6, now I do think that white should play d5. After d5, we have the dark square diagonal, and I think we're doing very well. Talking with our players.
Yes, Robert wanted to share that he's a bit disappointed in the result, but that he is going to keep trying and keep working. So I think that's exactly what we want to hear from our players. It's very important not to get discouraged. Believe me, I was in need of the same advice just last weekend when I took a bad loss against a lower rated player. So we all do it. We all make mistakes. We all have bad games. I will not air his dirty laundry in public, but Andrew himself has taken some losses about which he was most unhappy. So
just the one or two, though. So
yeah, just 1994, was it?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember the year. The skies were black that day.
Indeed. So I think we already have a position that's critical. I think that white must play d5 here. I think anything other than d5 is too passive already, and black will be able to play rook e8 and rook d8 and consolidate an advantage.
Let's see if I can get our remaining players into the chat to join us now to maybe do some post commentary, but we'll see if they are free to do so.
All right, so if white doesn't play d5, I'm not sure what else we really play here. Maybe rook e1, maybe rook d1. I think anything like knight c5 or c5 is a little bit slow and it doesn't really do anything. The knight on c5 is nice. This trick of taking on b7 to move the queen away from this diagonal is nice in some positions, but here it's just not necessary. And probably black would be quite happy after b6. Knight b7 looks like an idea to try and force the queen away from this diagonal, but your knight is actually trapped on b7, so we can swap queens as black and win a piece. So instead, I'm not sure what white would play other than d5. So again, I think this just highlights how important it is to play d5 here.
Will you do me a favor and actually can we take a brief moment and send an email to our players via the AC email? Let's just give them the Twitch address. Sorry, a little behind the curtain here happening, but I was not able to do it from my phone. Fabulous.
No problem.
It's up to them if they want to join. Okay. Returning. My attention is now fully on the game. And we do, it seems, have one of the problems that sometimes comes up when we are down to one game to watch, which is both players are taking their thinking time. So at this moment, I suppose the only thing to say is, Andrew, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. I could maybe use some more coffee, but so we'll wait for a brief interlude and refill our drinks and everything like that. In the meantime, I guess we can talk a little bit about the tournament and the tournament standings, stealing some of our thunder from later tonight, though. It's kind of off to an interesting start. All of the players that won last week had very interesting games this week, and it looks like we're going to be left with 6 players with 2 points heading into round 3. We did have a slight upset. Our last tournament and early favorite, Aaron, lost his game with White against Charlie, and that kind of throws the tournament wide open at this point.
I think in our neighborhood we call that a shocker. Yeah, I was really surprised to see that, and actually really have not spent a lot of time going through that game yet. So that'll be a plan for this afternoon ahead of this roundup. I'm intrigued to look at the intricacies of that game because it's been a busy week. But yeah, I think Charlie played well last tournament. Certainly it should not come as too much of a surprise that he could be a contender, but I had not picked him to win it all, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can continue this run of success that he's had through 2 games.
Yeah, it was a good game by both players, and I guess if we're going to have a really slow moment, we can briefly take a look at it because Charlie played a very unusual opening. He played a6 and e6 right away, and then tried to transpose into some sort of Sicilian. So a move like knight c3 would transpose directly into a con. Instead, I think that Aaron played correctly d5, and this forces black into a mediocre Benoni, to say the least. So, for example, d6, c4, and now I think we really have to play for a check Benoni with e5. It's just hoping for too much to take on d5, which is what happens. And already we see that White has a very nice position, and I think that Aaron played very cleanly. I really like the move h3, dominating this bishop, and maybe we can leave it there as a bit of a teaser. But we see that Aaron got a very nice position out of the opening, but Charlie was able to fight back later and kind of squeeze out a win.
Yeah, the one thing I'll definitely say is that nobody should be looking at this game and deciding that Aaron has lost his fastball.
No, and I would not recommend playing like Charlie did just because it worked out in this game.
Very much agreed.
All right, so it does look like we have not had a move yet in the other game, which I think is good. I think this is an important moment, and Frank should spend some time and hopefully find the d5 move. I think that if we don't play d5 now, we just really lose our opportunity to play that at all. And concretely, that's because black is going to play rook e8, chase the queen away, and then rook d8 and pile up on this d5 square. And we might be able to play d5, but not without a serious concession. That d5 pawn would be very weak, and it would give several diagonals for the black pieces.
You know, Andrew, I think we're in a moment here. We've got a lull. We're down to 1 game. Why don't we take a quick break, refresh our drinks, and we'll come back in just a few minutes with a little more action.
That sounds good.
So thank you all for watching. Please stick around. We will be right back, and we're going to keep this game going right through to the finish. We have some host maintenance that needs to happen. So we'll see you just in a few moments.
You can look at my smiling face in the meantime. All right, we're back.
No.
Now I figured out how to press the mute button and unmute us.
Oh, we're clearly seasoned professionals.
Yes.
Yes, so thank you. As I was saying, we are refreshed and ready to resume our broadcast. And Andrew, we have had a couple of moves in the interim.
Yeah, so Frank spent some time and correctly found d5, a very strong move, and I think this gives him the best winning chances of all the moves he could have played. And now, instead of taking on d5, I do like taking on d5 the most. Rook e8 is also a consideration. Instead of those, we see that black played c5. So this is an interesting idea. The concept is going to be that Ted is going to allow this d5 pawn to be passed forever and be very close to queening. But his argument is going to be that the d5 pawn can't go any further, and now he can play around it, play for ideas like f5 and f4, and just go for mate at all costs.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is some legitimacy to that strategy. Certainly, in any timed game, I think it's important to recognize that players feel a certain amount of pressure and things can work. But I have to say it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, there's a lot of time left, so we'll see if White can come up with something. I think any plan is going to have to involve getting the knight to either b5 or e4 to dislodge this blockader of the d6 square. So we're going to have to move the queen at some point. To that end, we had Frank playing f4. One idea would be to play bishop e5 eventually. We can't do it now; that would just lose a pawn.
But perhaps rook a to e1 and something on
Correct. And now black picked up a tempo and the open file, and white correctly brought the queen back to f3. I think f3 makes the most sense. It keeps an eye on g3. We're going to potentially bring the other rook into e1, and we want to leave this battery on the f file where it does have some ideas of f5 perhaps.
Yeah, not to play too much for cheap shots, but I also like the fact that the queen has an eye on sneaking over to c3 or to, yes, as you noted, g4. Both of these with the idea of pegging on that g7 pawn and the checkmate threats that lie adjacent.
Yeah, so again, we have a moment where we can start to think about what to do. Ideally, we would want this blockader on d6 to be, well, really anything other than the queen. So probably a knight, but I would also consider the bishop in this particular position because we might be able to play for some trick on f4, whether that's g5 and taking on f4 or sacking a piece on f4. But the knight is a long ways away. We can't really get there. And in fact, the knight really doesn't have that many great squares. I think the only pattern would be to go back to f8 and reroute the knight to f6. So probably we want to ignore that and double on the e file. Rook e7 looks like the only square that allows us to do this, although in a perfect world we'd like to bring the rook somewhere into the white camp. We just can't. White is controlling all the entry squares, so we're going to have to play rook e7 and rook e8.
Right. Yeah, that does look sensible. I was looking at something kind of crazy, which I'll throw out there since we're waiting on some moves anyhow, which is the idea of playing f5 and just trying to stop this pawn roller that white looks like he's ready to perpetrate on me. But I guess now I think about it, the tactics of queen takes g3 check stop f5 on their own.
They do for the time being, although we do have to be aware that white will have time to play king g2 and queen c3 and put some pressure on the diagonal this way. We're still controlling g3 with both the queen and the king, and now we would be threatening f5 perhaps, following it up with a move like f6 someday, or even rook f4 to g4.
I suppose we could play f5 right now as white. I mean, at the very least, this queen g3 check, queen takes, bishop takes would end in the pawn taking on g6, right? So can we put that, just make sure for the sake of our viewers who are maybe not following that idea, that maybe this actually does work out.
At least here it does, because we're winning this piece on g6, which is hanging.
Exactly. We have this capture at the end. But there are other options,
yeah,
obviously.
Unfortunately, I think that f5 makes a permanent weakness on g3, and the move knight e5 looks very strong right away.
Right, yeah.
We're hitting the queen, the c4 pawn. I think this compels a move like queen c3 to defend it. Queen e2 just looks a little bit too loosening. We would double, and now the queen is under the gun.
Right, even play f6.
For black?
Yeah,
that's
right.
what again, we're in perfect lockstep. So I think after a move like this, now we would play f6. And the idea is that we've blunted this diagonal, and furthermore, eventually this bishop might come to e5. And in the interim, we're already threatening really horrible things on g3.
Horrible things. Sick, disgusting things.
We would like to play knight c4 because queen c4, of course, runs into mate in 2. But knight c4 also is even better. It allows a mate in 1,
right,
but for white. So we can't play that just yet.
It's kind of a cool game, actually, that both sides are operating with a dark square battery with queen and bishop. There's something unusual about that. I don't think I've seen a game quite like this that recently.
No, it's a little bit surprising to get all of these center pawns out of the way and have these batteries left. So again, f6, it's a move that permanently blunts this battery by white, but it keeps the black one alive. So f6 is not a bad idea, even though we might not generally want to play a move like f6.
I have to also applaud both players because it occurs to me that when you're both left with the dark squared bishop and the queen and these dark square weaknesses, that both players are playing to checkmate the other fellow as opposed to trading the dark squared bishops off and devolving into an endgame. So I think we all benefit from that, so I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. So we actually had Ted decide to wait on doubling rooks and instead play b6. I think chess is a very concrete game. I think b6 is a little bit slow, and I would rather see something more incisive. I think this is an opportunity to do something quickly, and the c5 pawn, it's not really my biggest concern in the position, so I don't think we need to shore it up just yet.
Yeah, I talked to Ted about after his loss last week. I think he was feeling a little bit down about it, and I had said that I want to see a little bit more of Killer Ted come out, and he said that he felt the same, that he knew what I meant, and that he was interested in my feedback as to how to do it. And I think I answered a little vaguely. I said we'll talk about it a little bit in the roundup. But I would say, Ted, when you watch this back later, as hopefully you're not checking us out right at this moment, but this would be a good example that worrying about defense in this position when there's nothing immediately threatened is not maybe the prime priority. Especially playing as black, you want to try and make sure that all your pieces are playing actively first and go for attacking chances here. As both sides have some major threats, and you don't want to be the one left a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not going to last forever, so we have to do something with the open file right away. One thing that you might have heard is that rooks get traded down the open files. So if we don't want to trade off all of the rooks, and again, I think that black needs to keep some rooks because this d5 pawn is a passed pawn. There are some endgames that are going to be very nice for white if we get to an endgame. So black really needs to do something now to convert the better king safety of the black king compared to the white king.
Yes, keeping in mind how chaotic chess is and how difficult it is for all of us to play, I would say that if Frank knows the power of this protected passer, that he has an incredible benefit just for the fact that he knows exactly one plan that he can use. And that gives him a power that we want to try and take away. So if I'm playing black, I need to try and get active, complicate, and go for things because I don't want my opponent to be the only one who knows what's going on.
Yeah, and I think this actually kind of brings up another interesting point. White might like to play bishop e5 and swap off the dark square bishops. That ends a lot of attacking chances for both sides. The black king is safer than the white king, so we generally want to make a few trades to improve the safety of our own king. And trading off these bishops gets us a little bit closer to some of these endgames where, frankly, the black knight is a very long way away from the d6 square. If the black knight could teleport to d6, well, I think that's reasonably safe for black because c4 is a little bit loose, and that would also support the e4 square for rook lifts like this.
Yes, and black would also have the action of the b5 pawn move to undermine the d pawn even further.
Yeah, unfortunately, knights don't move like that, so we have to come up with something else in the meantime. And now Frank, perhaps seeing this e5 idea, played h4, and the idea is that after h5, bishop e5 is happening, the dark square bishops are getting traded off, the white king is relatively safe, and then white can kind of have a free roll of trading off the queens and pushing the d-pawn home.
Looks pretty good, yeah, and follows what I know to be very good strategy in playing against a knight, which is to first take away their advanced squares, right? Take away the squares to which the knight can move going forward and going deeper into your position, and then work on these h4, h5 moves, right, to push them back. So this is, there's some textbook to this. I would say that that Frank is doing some things that make a lot of sense, and that classical masters would agree with.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good summary of, first of all, how to play against knights, but also what's going on in this position and what we need to focus on. So perhaps black should leave the rook lift for later, because now rook e7 takes away the knight's best square. We might still want to play knight to e7 followed by knight f5. The knight on f5 is a very strong piece, and it's hard to chase the knight away with g4 because the h4 square is a little bit tender. Even if the white pawn is no longer there, so we're not hanging a pawn, I think that still knight h4 is a strong idea because it coordinates well with this battery. However, we do have to point out that there might not be a battery anymore depending on what white is able to do. So if I were playing with black, I would seriously consider f6 right away. It prevents the bishop from coming into e5 after the knight vacates its post, and it also helps to support the black king a little bit. By taking away a lot of these ideas, we don't have to worry about queen g4 quite so much. The f7 square is actually a very safe square for the king, and now we can play for moves like knight e7 and knight f5. g6 is a real idea already. The king is very good at defending itself against one attacker. So I think this would be an example of black taking advantage of the overextension of the white position as opposed to just getting rolled up.
Yeah, that's very good. Yes, that f6 move would show great awareness. We'll see if Ted can find it. Otherwise I think we might be on the verge of seeing a bit of a roller from Frank. I think there's a lot of strong moves coming in quick succession that are going to help him consolidate his position. For example,
concretely, if he makes a lazy move, let's say rook d8, now I think we have some large problems that we have to solve. Bishop can come into e5 right away. I think I like this the most, and then perhaps following it up with a move like queen g4. So, for example, we can trade and then play queen g4. We're now controlling this f5 square. We're putting some pressure here, and I think taking away the best square from the knight is worthwhile.
Yeah, and also this is a situation where you're suddenly realizing that white is spoiled for choice. We have endgame advantages of the protected pass pawn. We have kingside attacks with f5, f6 looking really scary.
I think the only way to play this for black would be knight c8, and after f5 to play f6. And here I do think this is okay for black. We can probably put the knight on either d6 or e5, and white has a minimal advantage here. White still does have an advantage. The d5 pawn is safe, the queen defends c4 horizontally, and white can open up another front by playing a4 and a5. So what do you think about the move that was actually played in the game of instead queen d7?
Well, it does take some of the pop out of bishop e5, although I think the idea is still present. But I gotta think that we should go with a similar plan and just play h5 and kick the knight away. I'm not totally sure what Ted is up to with that move, to be completely honest. I suppose he could climb into h3, but I'm not sure that that alone that's going to create enough for him.
Yeah, so I do think that there are a few ideas that are worth pointing out. The queen does defend f7. So if we have something like, for example, h4, knight e7, bishop e5, after this trade, despite the fact that we're attacking the f7 pawn, I think that black can probably play something like knight c8 and defend. That said, this is a terrible position for black. We really don't want to go in for this.
No, especially because I think, just to point, and I know you're just looking at a variation, but e6 there looks brutally strong because we pick up the a8 rook.
Yeah, exactly. We can't take back safely because we would gain a key tempo on the queen, and a8 is going to hang. And this is really the risk of disconnecting your rooks. But again, this is one idea in the position. In this particular case, we never want to trade on e5. We can't let another pawn come to the center. the other idea of queen f5 is it does stop queen g4 and it supports the f5 square. So now, again, something like this, we can play knight f5 and the knight is not hanging, although we do have to deal with a move like queen to g4 because now this queen is undefended and white has too many threats, and I think this would be winning for white.
Yeah, that looks gross. Is it okay to say gross? I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the move that I would choose to play is actually bishop d6, blockading right away and keeping our options open for later. We're still preventing queen g4. We might be able to play rook d8 and defend this way, and later we can think about putting a knight on f5.
Right. It looks like instead of the bishop e5 ideas, Frank has gone for this f5 push right away. Certainly, I think we have some merits with trying to crack the kingside position open, but it does give this e5 square back to the knight. Which
yeah, and I think
Ted's
that's a big
into.
mistake. I think allowing knight e5 gives away most of the white advantage.
Yeah. Ted not caught sleeping on that move, right? Saw that his knight could regain the center and went for it. So good heads-up play there, and exactly the kind of thing that we're looking to see when people are in bad positions is how to fight with resistance.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are really only a few moves that are even worth considering here. Queen c3 is an idea, and taking is an idea. I don't see anything other than those two moves. Queen f4 is too loose. We can play this already, and we are going to win the g3 pawn when all is said and done. The queen must go back to defend b2, and we can safely scoop up this pawn, defend the bishop, and the dark squares are too much for black.
Yeah, h4 is hanging as well.
So instead of that, we did see queen c3, so we're renewing our threat here.
I had a feeling that the idea of trying to pin that knight to the mate square was too much for Frank to pass up, but now I think we go back to this f6 idea.
Yeah, and I think f6, black has a clear advantage. So this cements the knight on e5. The knight is a great piece on e5, permanently taking a look at c4, threatening to hop into g4 with a few mating ideas, and now black can double rooks on the e-file at his leisure, and there's really no good way to get rid of this knight.
The little birds are carrying our messages far and wide. Ted vote f6 is on the board. Good for him. Good for him. It's so tough for me. I find that I, like most people I think who are uninvolved in the particular combatants, I just find myself rooting for the underdog over and over. Whoever's worse, I want to see them come back. Which is ironic because I don't want to draw.
Yeah, although I love a back and forth game. I think there's a lot to talk about. It's very exciting, and we see some fun chess, and we get to think about a lot of these lines even if they don't happen on the board.
Right, so you like black's position. I think that's established, right? Ted's come a long way back in just a few turns. But what do you do here as white? How can you try and complicate? What are we playing?
Yeah, good question. So at this point, we have to understand that we're worse with white. It's hard to say that out loud because we've had a good position for so long and we still have the d5 pawn, which is kind of our trump. But, however, I think that black has plenty of play, plenty of good squares. The pawns being pushed does open up squares for the black minor pieces. And the white king still kind of is loose and airy. Even if there's not any mating attacks right now, there might be later. If the queen vacates the g3 square, moves like knight g4 become very strong. So with that introduction, we have to counterattack quickly. I think a4 and a5 is the only thing that makes much sense here.
Yes, this was just my thinking. We have to try and get our last few pieces involved. I jokingly was talking to another tournament member, Nick Riccadelli, about his game. I called it Nick Riccadelli and the Sleepy Queen Side, as if it were a children's book. And we can see here that Frank is suffering from the same sleepiness. That he's got to do something to get these pieces involved, opening up a second front with a5, trying to take, maybe there's a weak pawn on b6, maybe we can even make some trades. That protected pass pawn is still a big card to play, and he wants it to gain more relevance than it has right now.
Yeah, and in this particular case, I think that black would be challenged to find a5. If a5 is played, again, I think black is doing fantastically well, and we can just slowly attack and build our position. But a5 is a hard move to play. We're giving up this backwards b pawn. However, it's very hard to attack. The bishop defends it well. We're going to have plenty of time, and even if we end up losing that pawn, the amount of effort that white is going to have to put into winning it by doubling rooks over here, something bad is going to happen to the loose king.
Yeah, I'm suddenly reminded, although the structure is comically different, of the Fischer-Spassky game in the Nimzo Indian in 72, where Fischer plays this a5 move, and despite the seeming weakness of the b6 pawn, you realize that Spassky had no ability to attack it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a key point. Weakness is only as weak as your opponent's ability to attack it. Until they can attack it, you don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah, this is a sort of unified field theory kind of principle that helps you when you're battling between principles in chess and feel like none of it makes any sense. So often, you make moves in advanced games where, yes, that does create a weakness, but if the opponent's not able to exploit it, it's simply not a problem.
Yeah, for sure. So I think Frank picked a different route. He's going to try and bring his knight to e4, which is a nice square for the knight, where it would d6. It would stop black from hopping a piece in there, and maybe he'll have some ideas of trading queens on b5. Again, if white can trade queens, a lot of his problems are solved. Now that c4 is defended, he's okay with this queen trade on b5, for example.
I gotta say, I like Ted's response a lot. This knight to g4 move with the idea of the rook coming into e3, winning a pawn immediately, and further creating mating attack ideas. This is not so easy. I think Frank is going to have to abandon any kind of the queenside play that we were talking about, and maybe play something like rook a to e1.
Yeah, although I think Frank is probably lost now. I don't see any good counters to the many threats. Queen f3 looks like the only move that tries to hang on, and even that doesn't look like quite enough.
Yeah, I just realized that after rook a to e3, I can simply swap rooks and then take on f5. Yeah.
And again, too many threats to deal with.
Right. Wow. How much it's changed in just a few turns. Here we were given Ted grief for that b6 move, but one inaccurate move from Frank, and he's leapt to life here.
Yeah, so I think the picturesque way to finish this off would be rook f1, queen g6, and there's no good defense to bishop e5, and everything falls apart.
Wow. We'll see if we get something. That beautiful.
Yeah, so I think queen f3 is the only move that, like I said, makes any sort of defensive sense. And the idea is we would like the knight to go back and undo itself. I do think we have the move h5, cementing that knight on g4, and now rook e3 is a big problem to deal with.
Excuse me, sir. I would like your knight to return from whence he came. That's not a good sign of a position when you wish the knight would go back to e5.
Yeah, that's for sure. So here, just a fun line to point out. After rook e1, taking control of the e3 square, instead of doing anything immediately, we probably can simply play queen d6, putting some nice pressure over here. And after a move like king g2, we have created all sorts of weaknesses, and there's probably going to be some mating attack shortly thereafter.
A nice fundamentals point here. One of the reasons that we harp on connecting your rooks is that you can see how black has the benefit of all exchanges here. He can park his rook on e8 because if Frank ever cracks and trades, as we sometimes refer to such things, it doesn't do anything for his position. Black will become sole possessor of the e-file instead of a contested.
Yeah, exactly. And even here, I think the move that I would most consider is actually rook e5, offering an exchange sacrifice in order to really highlight just how strong this knight is and how bad the white position is.
Just a disgusting play to try and make the roundup highlight reel, Andrew. Looks like Felix has come back to the chat. Welcome back, Felix. Glad to have you. Oh, Felix becoming a Lydia fan. Wow, didn't realize she'd already gained followers. Good for her in her first tournament.
It was a nice game, so I think you have to at least appreciate the attacking motifs that we saw in that game.
Yes.
Even if you have no idea who the players are, it was a very nice game for black.
We are 100% here for well-played chess, and Lydia, I thought, played some today. So, and to her credit and to his as well, Rob played, although with some inaccuracies clearly, well enough to make it very difficult. Because good chess never happens when one player simply wilts. So as we are, praising Lydia for her accurate play here, let's not lose sight of what it takes to play a good game.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of a good game, we now get to see what Ted can find after rook e1 was played. So we already talked about swapping rooks on e1 and taking on f5. I wonder if black has anything better than that at this point.
Is this a challenge to me to find it?
Not really. I mean, there are a bunch of reasonable ideas already. For example, I think just taking off the pawn and threatening queen f2 is plenty. I don't know that we really need to find more than that. The one thing that I would suggest that black avoid here is queen d6, knight e4, and we're really compelled to sacrifice this exchange. And now, unfortunately, we don't have the tempo we need to grab on g3, so I think white would be doing okay here.
Right, and just to make sure we explain that very simply, if we take on g3, white can simply trade queens, and now there are hanging pieces on g3 and g4, one of which we're able to nab immediately.
Yeah, so we would have to take on g4 because h5 has not been played here.
Of course, yeah, king g2 would be a massive, massive mistake, losing the chance to win.
Yes. But instead, taking a pawn off is always a good thing. As we said before, this looks like plenty for the white pieces.
Yes, simple and effective. Felix, we totally understand. You can't hear us probably right now. You're back to essay writing. We do support the academics here at Acceptable Chess and understand that certain things have to come first.
Only if it doesn't interfere with your chess, of course.
That's true. Yeah, as long as your chess homework is done.
Okay, so bishop e5 played immediately. The idea here is going to, again, be to swap everything off. This does give white the chance to bail out and sacrifice an exchange. I think he should probably take that opportunity and take on e5.
Yeah, I think so too, but I don't think he will. I think, not to say that I know Frank's style too well yet, as I don't, but I think that for a lot of newer and less experienced players, that understanding the desperation of a situation like this may not come naturally, and it may seem to them like you're just going to lose more slowly by sacking the exchange, right? And I think to some extent, that might even be true, right? I mean, white's position will still be difficult, but I think you and I both have a lot of experience with swindling games after recovering the energy in this way.
Yeah, I do think that kind of a little bit glib, but there are no positional exchange sacrifices below the master level. There are only positional exchange losses below the master level.
Oh dear.
Okay, and it looks like the pressure has finally gotten to Frank. He played queen f3, which neglects the b2 bishop, and I think there are going to be too many threats now.
All right, Ted. I am sending you brainwaves. If you wish to be ever known as Killer Ted, you must find this move.
Yeah, now it's not quite so simple. There is still a little bit going on because g4 is hanging, but the point is that after bishop d4, this bishop is absolutely monstrous, and I think there's too much for white to deal with.
Yeah, I think that exchange of minor pieces has to favor black, even though we were talking about white's desire for simplification to make his endgame pawn.
Yeah. I would also accept h5, of course, though. Here, this knight is fantastically strong, and once again, probably exchanging on e5 is the best approach.
That is true. Something else that we can make mention of that is starting to, at last, become relevant is the fact that both players are getting very close to ticking down under 10 minutes. And I think, with only a 5-second increment, they should be there fairly soon. So when that is in play, I would say probably the position will continue to favor Ted even more because there are still so many attacking chances. Now, on the other hand, if exchanges happen too quickly, you could find suddenly Frank right back in the driver's seat. All he has to do is get a couple of pieces traded off, but it does make sense to me that maybe doing something prudent like h5 and letting that time pressure build up a little bit more might be a smart play.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you're attacking, you do want mutual time pressure. Ideally, you'd like just your opponent to be in time pressure,
Yes.
but we don't always get that in chess. However, if you have to sacrifice material for your attack, then you want as much time as possible, because it's very important after you've sacrificed material that you don't slip into a lost position with too many pieces traded off. Not that any of us would know about that.
If I really had my wishes, I would have my opponent be on time pressure, and I'm up a piece. It's a kind of deep insight that
Yeah,
you've come to Acceptable Chess for.
Guess that would make us John Harden.
Ah.
Or I guess you were the one. We would be playing John Harden.
Wow, I see. Yeah,
Sorry.
sick burn, poorly executed.
Pretty much. So, story of my life.
Yeah, well.
All right, so queen f3, at least it's a complicated move, so it has that going for it. I really can't complain about it too much. We do see h5 on the board. I really like this move, and I think it's a nice way of continuing the game.
I take it all back, Ted. This was probably the smarter play.
Yeah, so now we have to decide what happens after bishop takes e5. I would be perfectly comfortable sacrificing the h5 pawn. I don't think it really contributes much to the position, and allowing moves like knight d3 is already reasonably strong. Probably we would like to play queen d6 or queen c7 first to get on g3. So for example, something like this. And now the queen has to come back, and the queen has a hard time finding good squares to come back to. Queen e2 lets us double up, and d6 is not yet a threat because we don't have enough pieces in the vicinity.
Yeah, and knight e4, which looks to bring d6 online, looks a little pinny. I'm a little bit concerned about that knight hanging out in front of the queen that way.
Yeah, probably knight f7 is going to be sufficient, and it's maybe not. I think we have knight f6 here.
Ooh.
So we'd have to find something here. So this is probably not exactly what black wants to do. So for that reason, probably queen d6 is a more reasonable move. I don't know. It looks like white has gotten as much as you could have hoped for, and probably I would have taken on b2 to avoid some of these lines.
Yeah, maybe that was the better way to play. Interesting. We could be seeing a Jake's comeback here.
Yeah, so after taking with the bishop, I also like the idea of swapping a pair of rooks. By taking with the rook first, I think that taking back on e5 is compelled. If we don't take back on e5, rook e8 is a little bit too strong, allowing this doubling. And knight e4 looks like a move we'd like to play, but it doesn't work because this is simply too strong for black. So after the rooks get swapped, now the knight comes to e5, and we've solved a lot of those tricks that we were just looking at. Now the queen doesn't have so many good squares, and I'm frankly not sure what to do with the white pieces. Probably take on h5 and hope for the best.
Yeah, I have to think that's worth something, the material consideration there. I mean, especially with the still lingering somewhere, this idea that if everything gets traded, you are for choice.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I just want to point out to everybody, black can immediately win the pawn back with queen a4. We're heading 2 pawns, and this looks reasonable enough. There's no good way to defend e3 that doesn't immediately drop c4. If, for example, we could defend the pawn with the queen somehow, after knight takes we would be able to play rook f4, and we're at least causing some complications to the position. But first of all, the queen can't defend a3, and second of all, even if the queen could be on f3, it's in the way of rook f4. So there are many moves wrong with that.
I think that's a really good demonstration when we talk about positional chess. Just put your knight in the center, because look at how many different variations this knight is playing spoiler for white.
And furthermore, we're okay doing this even at the cost of a pawn. I'm not even considering winning the pawn back until I've exhausted all other possibilities.
Yeah.
I want to look at things like rook e8, queen a4, not for winning the pawn, but for infiltrating to the second rank. And only then do we say, well, maybe we can just take back our pawn and we don't have to worry about it so much.
I'm starting to think that white might be climbing in here. We've got a number of exchanges happening.
Few moves that didn't make as much sense. So after rook takes e5 here, rook takes e5, now we see a little bit of a mistake with pawn takes. I really don't like this. It blocks the e-file. Black needed the e-file in order to continue the attack. And most importantly, the white knight has a beautiful home on e4. It keeps the black queen out of d6, and it threatens this very nice f6 tactic.
Yeah, and we see interesting, right? So this game has been such a fascinating back and forth because both sides had these dark square batteries. Both sides used them to try and create checkmate threats. Both sides were defeated in that. Then we had another case of switching positions because black had an excellent knight in the center and now white does.
Yes, and I think this just goes to show that the person who makes the last mistake loses the game. So there's certainly still more chess to be played, but all of a sudden we really like the white position again. After f5, the mistake that we noticed for white. The reason it was such a mistake is because it gives the e5 square. So by planting this dark pawn on e5 again, it really, really disrupts the only thing that black had going for some amount of time there, the nice central e5 square.
Yeah, you can see how, for example, you could make an argument here that black has this very powerful central square with his control of d4, but again, we see, similar to our discussion of weaknesses, black can't do anything with it. It's very hard to see how the knight could even get there, and once he was there, although it would be a powerful piece, he's not in a position to actually attack anything.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Even if the knight, again,
Teleported.
transports over to d4, it's not doing much. These light squares are not enough for any mating attacks. The queen can simply come into g5 and contribute to all these attacks. One nice trick, if black brings the queen away from the defense of the king, f6 is very strong, and this would compel recapturing on f6 because, again, a lazy move like taking on c4, for example, is going to run into some really nasty threats, and there are too many checks. This queen is going to support the f8 queen square, and I think this is pretty much over for the black pieces.
Yeah, there's just too much. Yeah, king g2 would be a nice way to possibly risk losing the game, though. That's kind of cute.
Yeah, let's not hang knight e3. Although
Right.
even then, I think we hide on h3 or h2, probably h1 here as well.
Right.
And taking this would probably not be ideal.
Oh, I was even thinking about the ultra heartbreaker line of, back up a second here, because I was looking at actually, so queen d2, and if you decide that you don't want to lose the exchange, you just get mated.
Yeah, we would try and avoid that, but we, of course, have king g1. This is all a little bit of a flight of fantasy because black correctly recognized the risk and played rook f8 to slow down this f6 break. So, John, what do you think about playing f6 anyways?
Right here?
Yeah.
Let me see. So f6, and after, I presume that knight takes is going to be the move, and we take with knight, and then rook takes. I can grab on h5. I'm not sure that I love that, though, because then I think in that line, black would have rook takes f1, king takes f1, queen h3 check. And
yeah,
maybe I'm getting in?
I really don't like that line. What I was looking at is sacrificing the f6 pawn with something like knight to g5.
Got it, to grab it, yeah, to get into that e6 square. Certainly, that makes perfect sense. The knight is pinned, and which is more... Oh, you know what? Maybe I don't even want to go to e6, because this knight is so well placed, I can try and play for checkmate ideas over on the h-file, and if the rook comes to f7, he's actually better defended than he is right now.
Yeah, so one cute line would be queen g4. This seems like the only thing that is worth trying for black. And surprisingly, I think we can take on g4, and this endgame, because of this protected passed pawn, is going to be extremely strong for white. All that said, I don't want to trade queens. I'd probably play queen d3, eyeing this h7 square.
Yeah, rook f6 is threatened.
Exactly, yep. And I think this forces a move like e4.
Yeah, that would shut that down and create some chances. Oh man, both players ticking down steadily here.
Yeah, so white is still considering what to do after rook f8. Let's jump back to the live position. But again, this is a positional pawn sacrifice trying to get to some good squares. Of course, we don't have to sacrifice right away. We can play knight g5. However, the downside of this is now when knight f6 is played, this f5 pawn is a little bit of a traitor in our midst. It's blocking some key lines for the white pieces.
Yeah, frustrating to have built up that nice battery on the f-file.
Yeah, and most importantly, the knight guards h5, so we don't have queen takes h5, which would be a very nice mating attack.
Right. Maybe the idea there would be something like knight e6, trying to get the knight into some good squares, and now I want to reroute the queen and play queen e3, queen g5.
Yeah, although I don't know if that's going to be enough, so maybe I just go scoop up the pawn, something like this, and if it's defended, we can double this way. Yeah. Of course, if knight g4 is ever played, now queen g5 is very strong, threatening everything under the sun.
Right.
And this queen just has no way to get into the position.
So it looks like we do have a couple more moves on board. Where did we leave off here?
We left off after rook f8, and we were extolling the potential virtues of f6, opening lines for the better placed white pieces. Instead, knight g5 was played. And again, I think this is a pretty reasonable move, and part of it is just not being willing to give up a pawn when you're in mutual time pressure and you think you're better.
Right. Yeah, that's prudent with so little time. I think now if black tries something like g6, thinking maybe there's a tactical opportunity, probably just knight e6 right away spoils that party.
I think you're exactly right. Although after this, we might even be able to play a move like f6 again. And again, we're giving up a pawn, but these lines are already getting very open, and there are some serious threats. If rook takes, for example, I think that queen to f5 is already reasonable, because if everything gets traded off, for example, like this, this d-pawn is ready to run.
Super quick, as we like to say.
Yeah, something like this is already possible. The king must go over and try and control some squares. And in this particular position, I believe we have knight e6 check, and after the king comes here, we can probably play this way and start scooping up pawns over here.
Yeah, I like knight f5 just to hang on to that pawn for, even though I doubt it's our win condition, just be as obnoxious as possible. What little I know about knight endgames in depth is that knight endgames are frequently tactical endgames.
Yeah.
So pick up as many pawns as you can and keep control of the variations, and you should be in good shape.
And to be clear, I don't think we should necessarily go for that as white. There's no need to give up the pawn with f6 right away.
Right.
But it's just interesting to look at those positions because we do have so much going on.
Right. Yeah, I think when you're in a position like this as white, you want to cruise to victory. It's not a good idea, not necessarily a sign of success, to have white knuckled your way into the end game, and knight end games can be that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think a more reasonable plan would be something like queen e4, threatening f6 with mating ideas, and also threatening e5.
Felix, I'm not sure if you've officially taken off, but thank you for joining us, and see you later. Thank you all for staying with us. Looks like we got 6 people watching the stream. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Once again, this is an Acceptable Chess broadcast. I am John Harden here with National Master Andrew Hoy, and we are looking at a couple of games from the Autumn Classic, which is a 1 game per week tournament that we are still holding, and which we are still holding signups for one more round. So if you can get us $15, and we'll tell you how to do that, you can PayPal at acceptablechess@gmail.com. You are more than welcome to sign up. We will let you in with 2 half-point buys for the first and second round, and deal you in for our third round. There are 6 to be played in total. We are playing for prizes that include a trophy, a commemorative trophy, which will have the Autumn Classic on it of some size, a free roll into the next tournament, and a chess book on a topic of your choice. We have access, thanks to some of Andrew's connections, to a great deal of chess books, and we'll be more than happy to send you one for your first place finish, and actually on down to the third place finish. So more information, we'll put a bit of information here at the end of the broadcast, so that you can sign up. But most importantly, you can email at acceptablechess@gmail.com if you want to find out more. So, returning to the game.
Rook f6 makes a lot of sense. I think you must blockade this f5 pawn before everything gets opened up with f6. And now white has a few good options. I like knight e6 the most, immediately trying to open things up. And I think that there are some cute ideas once the knight comes to e6. There are going to be some amount of forks available to the white pieces. For example, now we can start to think about how we want to sacrifice on e5. What do you think about this position, John? Do you think white should play for winning a pawn? Do you think white should try and come up with a mating attack? What's your pleasure here?
Forgive me, I had to let my student know that the game is running a little longer than I'd planned, and that I'm running a little late. This is a tough bid. I mean, I have to think that if I were Frank here, I would probably, knowing me, I would go for the strategy that has worked out for me many times in the past, which is try and use the clock against my opponent. I have the better position, and I know that things are difficult for black, so I would try not to do anything too crazy, to be honest. I would know that trades favored me, create pressure where I could, but too much attachment to dramatic moves is going to probably bite me in the butt. So that's kind of my thinking, is stay conservative, but move quickly, right? I don't like what Frank's doing here, sitting on the position too long. I think it's reasonably simple for white to play, and you don't have to do anything to hit a home run here. You can only lose by running out the clock.
Yeah, I think it's important to try and stay up on the clock with both colors, as a matter of fact. And I like the idea of knight e6. And one surprising idea would actually be to infiltrate with the queen on the b5 square. So, for example, queen b3, then a4, then queen b5. And the idea is that one weakness in the camp, the king, the e5 square, the king side in general, is good, but two are usually required to actually put the game away.
Yes.
So here after rook f6, we actually see a repetition. The knight goes back to e4, allowing black to repeat at least once. And I don't know that Frank wants to make a draw, but like we said before, repeating moves is usually a good plan when you when you're for choice.
Yes, I think that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I want to talk about that because I have an interesting way of talking about this principle of two weaknesses that I think is something I talk to my students about a lot. Which is, to me, it all stems from the nature of chess as a turn-based game. Mm-hmm. That when you think about chess, it is a game in which I go and then you go. And so if on any one turn I'm only accomplishing one task or proposing one idea, my opponent should be expected to always be able to meet me, right? And counter that idea or propose a new topic, as it were. And so by trying to make the game full of weaknesses on both sides of the board, right? Create multiple problems, I'm starting to beat the math of the game, mm-hmm. right? My opponent simply cannot use his single turn or her single turn to deal with both threats, right? And the law of alternation begins to betray them.
Yeah, put simply, almost all chess tactics are based in double attack in some way, shape, or form. And there's really no way to win a chess game without some tactics. So I guess we'd say we need a double attack of some sort in order to win.
Right. Yeah, and if this game does finish in a draw, I think that'll be the lesson for Frank to take going forward as to how was I supposed to win that, you know? I think trying to open up a second front by whatever means you can. But also, actually moving back to my original point, it's important to point out the clock can also serve as that second weakness.
Yes, that's for sure. And letting yourself get into too much time pressure is definitely a mistake in positions like this.
Yes.
There's no reason not to play knight g5 and knight e6 here. And I think that's something you could do relatively quickly.
Yeah, Frank, I know you can't hear me, but you got to go.
Another option might be to reposition these pieces. So after the knight comes to e6, maybe we consider something like king g2, rook f3, and put the queen behind the rook. Or, again, we can consider swinging over to the queen side. But
yeah.
The point is there are a lot of moves that you can make relatively quickly and just stay up on time.
Yeah, you got to be a little ginger, right? Certainly that knight on g4 is still good, and I've lost far too many games, especially in my earlier years, to the sudden knight fork. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, this maneuvering, as long as you make sure that e3 never turns into anything, I don't think you have anything to fear from knight f2 or knight h2. So it's not so much to keep track of.
Yeah, so would you consider playing for a win as black now if knight g5 is played again?
So I guess the idea there would be, what, maybe play queen a4 and try and enter?
Sure, although that particularly doesn't look so appetizing after queen e4 and or f6. So there's a little bit going on there.
It's tough, right? I mean, it seems hard for me to play for a win. I mean, I suppose I could try something like a6, b5 and try and undermine that d-pawn. That seems like a productive plan. I could certainly go for that and hope that Frank's hesitation, causes further blunders. I think that there's some sensibility to it, but at the same time, maybe you're content with a draw because you're worse and you have time pressure as well.
Yeah, I think here I would probably play for a win with both colors, but I have a notorious stubborn streak, and I've lost many games by overpressing. In this particular case, after knight g5, if you want to play for a win with black, b5 is really the only way I see to do that.
Yeah.
And the idea would be you're making a lot of weaknesses. And in fact, the players did agree to a draw after knight e4, rook f8, and we've repeated the position 3 times, and I think both players are content to take the half point instead of playing on and potentially losing the game by overpressing.
Yeah, I can understand that play. I think somewhat prudent and not surprising. I think this actually gives us a wonderful opportunity tonight, we can get into this in more detail, but looking at the difference between this drawn position and the other drawn position which we had this week.
Yes, I think this is a fair result because of the back and forth, but there's still a lot of life left in the position. Both sides could choose to do something if they really wanted to, but with very little time and a lot of risk of losing if you do choose to play on, I think a draw is a reasonable result, and instead of playing on for more, White decided to take the safe results.
Yeah, I think we'll say a little bit more on that in our evening's broadcast. I'd love to talk about that more. But for now, I think we'll wrap things up there, especially with the roundup coming tonight. We got more than enough time on the stream left to talk at you. Thank you all for sticking around with us and watching. Once again, I'm your host, John Harden, here with National Master Andrew Hoy. And thanks again for participating in Acceptable Chess.
Thank you very much, and we will be back at 7 o'clock, so please tune in 3.5 hours, and you can check out all of the round 2 games, not just the ones that just happened.
Yes, and we'll have more information there on how to sign up for the tournament if you're still interested.
Thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon.